In this video, I will take you to the process of knitting this jumper. You will learn how to create the rib detail at the bottom and how to produce the keyhole style neckline. In case you missed last week's video where I explained how to create a sandwich trim, which will be used for this jumper, I will leave a link in the description down below. This is my tension swatch. I counted how many stitches and how many rows I have per 10 centimeters so I can learn my gauge. And that is 3.1 stitches and 4.9 rows per 1 centimeter. I will be drawing a very simple sketch of the top I am planning to make and will write the measurements as well. I would like this top to be quite oversized but quite short, so it will be 55 centimeters wide and 43 centimeters long. I'm also writing the measurements for the neckline, 22 centimeters to the point where I will begin the opening, which will be 6 centimeters, then shape the neckline, which will be 15 centimeters deep and 20 centimeters wide. This is the first time I'm knitting this type of neckline, so I'm not sure how it will come out, but it's a great experiment and a learning opportunity for all of us. I'm beginning to convert centimeters in stitches and rows, and I will write that down in the order I will have to be doing it. So far I know that I must cast on 170 stitches and knit 118 rows until beginning the neckline opening, which is 6 centimeters, therefore 30 rows. The neckline opening is 20 centimeters, which means is 62 stitches. I usually cast off half of the stitches in the very middle and then I decrease to shape the remaining stitches. In total I have to decrease 32 stitches, 16 on each side, so I will write down every row on which I will have to do a decrease. And I like to decrease every 1 row, every 2 rows, and every 4 rows. Then I will knit a few rows straight. As before, I will be setting the row counter back to 0. On row 0 is where I usually do the cast off in the middle. The next decrease will be on row 1, 2, and so forth, until I complete 16 decreases. This usually gives me a nice crew neckline. In the next section of this video, I will show you a very easy way to add a nice detail to one of your future projects. So I am beginning with a 1x1 rib and I have just knitted a cast on row, 3 rows tubular and 12 rows of 1x1 rib. For the last 2 rows, I increased the tension slightly, as after that I will have to do some transfers and I don't want my yarn to snap. If you watch my previous video, you will realize that this is very similar to that stitch. Here is just used a little bit different, it is only part of the rib to add a small detail rather than on the whole body. First, we have to transfer to have 4 stitches like so, and 2 of these needles will have 2 stitches. Once finishing transferring, knit 4 rows. Continue transferring so that the 2 needles in the middle will have 2 stitches and knit 4 more rows. Form a 1x1 cable with the 2 stitches and knit 4 more rows. I will now increase my tension on main bed to the same tension I will be using for the body, which is 5.1. And now we are ready to begin transferring stitches from river bed to main bed. The first stitch will be transferred in between the 2 stitches that we used to form the 1x1 cable previously. After transferring all stitches, knit 2 rows. Next, transfer 2 more stitches. After this transfer, we will have 5 stitches on main bed. We'll continue with another transfer, but this time I will leave one empty needle in between the last stitch I transferred and the one I'm currently transferring. This way we are forming an eyelet. Just make sure to place the needle in action before knitting 2 rows. And lastly, one more transfer and we have no more stitches left on a ribbon bed. At this point, I will actually change the double bed single plate to the single bed one, since I will continue using the main bed only from now on. My camera died, but I had knitted 118 rows of stockinette stitch, and now I'm ready to begin with the opening for the neckline. I will set my row counter back to 0 and place half of the needles in holding position or all the way out. At this point, I must change my sinker plate back for the double bed one so I can bring my ribbon bed up. I will grab the purl bar from stitches on main bed to form 4 new stitches on ribbon bed like so. I will be knitting half Milano for the edge so that it's very nice and straight and it will look very neat. To knit half Milano, I will put one of the ribbon bed cams into PR position. This way the carriage will knit both beds when knitting from right to left and main bed only when knitting from left to right. If you want to watch a full video on half Milano, I will link that below as well. Using one of these tools will enable me to add some more weight on these stitches so they knit nicely. So I'll continue like this for 30 rows. Once I have knitted the 30 rows, I can transfer the 4 stitches back to main bed. Just as before, the row counter goes back to 0 as now I'm ready to shape the neckline. I will just take my nose to make sure I decrease correctly. First, I must cast off 15 stitches. Then I will decrease 1 stitch every 1 row, every 2, and so forth. To decrease, I'll be using the 3-prong tool. and after finishing I will knit about 10 rows straight to finish up the neckline. I am now ready to cast off and remove this side of the machine, and for the other side I will repeat the exact same process. Form 4 new stitches on a riverbed, knit 30 rows half Milano and decrease the neckline just like on the right side. For the back panel I repeated everything except I did not shave the neckline. Next I will show you how I figured out my rib. I have a few ways in which I like to do that, so this is just one of them. What I did was I used my measuring tape to measure the curve of the neckline, and I did the same for the other side and I did the back as well. In total that came to 62 centimeters. Here you can see a little test that helped me figure out how many stitches I must cast on for the whole neckline trim. So I know that this small trim is 40 stitches, and after measuring it I know that is 14 centimeters wide. From that I can learn how many stitches I have per 1 centimeter of trim by dividing the number of stitches with the centimeters. 40 divided by 14, the result of that is 2.85 stitches per 1 centimeter. After knowing that, it was easy to calculate. 2.85 times 62 equals 176, and that means that I have to cast on 176 stitches for the neckline trim. Before attaching the trim, I will do the shoulder seam. One side of my trim is already hooked on my linker. I have made a mark on the center back of the top and also the center back of the trim, and I'll make sure to align these points. And once I have finished one half, I will remove it from the linker and continue with the other one. A little tip here: if you want to have less work to do at the end, you can weave in the tails on the needles on the linker. So now I will hook the other half of the trim and I have trapped the body. As you can see here, I haven't knitted enough rows of waste yarn and it's unraveling a little bit, but I will make sure to knit more rows next time so you can learn from my mistake. It's time to remove the waste yarn, which is probably my favorite part of any project. And here's the finished trim. All I have left to do now is to tie in the remaining loose ends and also closing the gaps on the edge using a mattress stitch. At this point, I'm not sure if I'm going to add sleeves on this jumper or if I'm going to just add a rib, so it's kind of like a vest, an oversized vest. So I have to still decide that. Please let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I do hope you've learned a couple of things from this video. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next video.